Hello friends, welcome back. Today's picture panel is Government House. Again, I'm actually really happy with myself. I managed to get right back to where this photo was taken, and I managed to really recapture the exact same scene. We can see that a few things have changed since this photo was taken. We can see that the gravel driveway has been paved over, that some of these stone fences have been replaced with metal ones, and if you look very closely, we can see that the entire building is missing. How did one of Toronto's 12 most notable buildings end up being completely destroyed, pushed into a ravine, and left to grow up as this unmaintained park that nobody outside of this neighborhood has ever heard of? To know that story, we need to know about who the residents of this building was. In Canada, one of the most obscure offices of the government is that of the Lieutenant Governor. It's like a mini Governor General, but for a province. In the words of my father, it's something that you really wouldn't hear their name unless it was during sort of the changing ceremony while one is leaving and another is coming in, if you just happen to catch that on the local news that night. Really, both the Governor General and Lieutenant Governor is just a cushy job for sort of washed up political figures. These are the Lieutenant Governors. Can you name yours? Before Canada's Confederation, these were important governors appointed by the Queen and actually basically worked as the royal in the area. But since Confederation, really they've been a rubber stamp role, and definitely in the last 75 years or so, there's no example of any province really withholding royal assent on anything that the province has ever done. There are a lot of ceremonial roles that these people fill, but honestly, I don't think there's really anything that they do that couldn't be done equally well by, say, a really cute dog or something. In Ontario, this office costs the taxpayer about $2 million a year, and that's a real bargain compared to the federal version, which costs us about $35 million a year. If you include what the D&D and RCMP and Global Affairs Office contribute, that starts to get really close to $50 million a year, just to have this lady kind of rubber stamp everything that the government has already approved. Anyway, in the spirit of spending unbelievably large sums of money on this obscure office, in 1915, the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario moved from this humble abode to this, the Government House. Actually, the fourth Government House built in Ontario, and the last one like it. This giant French chateau on the side of a ravine in Toronto was the most expensive residence that had ever been built in Canada at the time. It was even bigger than Rideau Hall, this lady's $7 million a year house that we still do maintain, actually, and it was even bigger than the White House, and even the most staunch monarchist had a hard time defending the fact that at the time it was even bigger than Clarence House, the place that the actual Queen lives at and did until 2002. Even though it was in Rosedale, Toronto's wealthiest neighborhood, full of mansions which today sell for $20 million plus each, Ontarians really thought it was a pretty opulent estate for the representative of the monarch to have. It wasn't just its size, maintaining it was ridiculous. It burnt over 900 tons of coal every year, meaning that most winter days it would burn through more coal in a single day than the average residents in Toronto would burn through in a year. By 1934, just maintaining it cost about $25,000 a year, which in 2020 money is about $500,000 a year, which is about twice what the actual maintenance bill for Rideau Hall is. By 1937, the last ever Lieutenant Governor to reside at the residence was kicked out only a year into his tenure. And all of the belongings of the house, all of the furniture, and even the lamps outside were all sold off, mostly to local restaurants for, frankly, a lot less money than the government was hoping to get. They then sold the whole building to the federal government, again, pennies on the dollar for what they thought it should be worth. During World War II, the government tried to use it as a hospital, but it wasn't actually very good for that, so no other hospitals wanted to take ownership of it after. It was then tried to be turned into the headquarters for the RCMP, but at that point it was already not maintained enough and fit for anybody of any stature in the RCMP's organization. So then it was used to host Hungarian refugees in 1954, and eventually it got decrepit enough that it wasn't even good for that. By 1959, the property was in such disrepair that the city offered to buy it back from the government for $1 just to tear it down. And they ended up not getting $1, but in 1960, they ended up buying the property for $100,000 and still ended up tearing it down. A few agencies tried to restore it, but were hit with sticker shock when they found out just how much it would cost to restore. Just to bring it back up into a condition that it could be used as a vacant building would cost about $250,000 in 1960 money, which would be about $2 to $2.5 million today. And to bring it into any state anybody would want to visit would cost millions more. In 1961, the Parks and Recreation Department finally took ownership of the building and destroyed it and turned it into Chorley Park. The park today isn't even landscaped. There is this small plaque off to the side that describes what used to be here, and you can see some of the landscaping is still there in shape, at least around the entryway where this circle used to be, but it's all grown up in native plants by now. For the most part, you can't make anything out. I tried to find signs in the landscape of where the building used to be, maybe a square or something that was raised if you stood at the right angle. I even tried to line myself up with the modern lamps that are in the park and the fence to try to see if maybe those were the original lamps, or at least lamps standing in the same footprints as them, but almost certainly not. Now, if you visit the park, you really can't tell that it's here, except for this. There's one small bridge that remains that used to be part of a big grand entrance. Let's go check it out. It looks like a bridge that you'd find in just about any park this size, actually. There's a lot of interesting terrain in this part of Toronto. It's been cemented up. You can't even tell any of the brickwork used to be here. There's a little bit of graffiti. Respect and love. Everybody should be treated equally. Some hops and robbers, craft beer cans. Looks like it's a place for suburban kids to come and be rebellious. And now you know the story of how one of Toronto's 12 most prominent buildings ended up becoming one of its least prominent parks. Have a beautiful day.